The film begins with a man named Mr. Muza, who has 4 sons. They are Ibra, the oldest, Elzin, Ammar, and the youngest, Ichol. At that time, Mr. Muza works as a security guard at a famous bank, a job he's had for over 20 years. Meanwhile, Ibra works as a security guard at a pool hall, Elzin is a waiter at a karaoke place, Ammar doesn't have a job right now, and Ichol is still in junior high school. Unfortunately, they don't have a mother because she passed away while giving birth to Ichol. Despite facing tough times, the 4 of them take care of each other. Now Ichol is still in school, and his dad wants him to do well and keep studying until he goes to college. This is different from his older brothers who didn't go to college because they didn't want to put a financial burden on their family. At night, Ibra, Elzin, and Ammar went to a nightclub they often visit. Inside the club, there's a fighting arena where people bet on the fights. On that night, they happened to bet on a really good female fighter named Jamila, who is Ibra's girlfriend. But during the fight, Ichol secretly showed up because he was curious about what his 3 older brothers were up to. Ibra, who spotted Ichol, scolded him right away. However, Elzin stood up for Ichol and let him watch the fight until Jamila won. After the fight, they celebrated Jamila's victory by drinking alcohol. They also invited Ichol to join them, and he ended up getting drunk. When they got back home, they tried to sneak in so their dad, Mr. Muza, wouldn't wake up. But to their surprise, their dad was already waiting for them. Mr. Muza scolded them for not taking care of their little brother and getting drunk instead. He also talked to Ibra, reminding him that as the oldest brother, he should be a good role model for Ichol and help him become a good kid, rather than encouraging him to do the wrong things like getting drunk. The next day, as Mr. Muza was taking Ichol to school, he told him to be a good and honest person, not to follow his 3 older brothers' bad actions. However, despite greeting his father, Ichol ended up skipping school. When Mr. Muza arrived at his workplace, his friend named Komar noticed that Mr. Muza seemed to be in pain. Komar advised him to retire from his job because he was old and not feeling well. It turned out that Mr. Muza had an illness he hadn't told his children about. Meanwhile, Ammar, who was unemployed, tried to impress a woman named Usti, but she was uncomfortable with his behavior and left. Usti's father, Mr. Haji, then appeared and asked Ammar to come to his house the next day. On another note, Ibra got into a fight with a customer who was bothering his coworker at his job. His boss scolded him for his actions, as their workplace was not meant for people who engage in bad behavior, even though Ibra had tried to protect his colleague. Meanwhile, Elzin faced insults because he accidentally bumped into a visitor while not doing his job properly. In the afternoon, Ichol was at home when he heard his father coughing really badly. He was worried about his dad, but because his dad, Mr. Muza, had told him to study, Ichol followed his dad's instructions and didn't ask him about it. The next day, while Ichol was skipping school, some tough guys scolded him. Ichol had a reputation for not paying when he played truant. Luckily, Ibra, who was quite well known, showed up and protected Ichol. Because of that, the tough guys let Ichol go and left. Ibra then scolded Ichol for skipping school, but Ichol explained that he didn't go to school because his dad hadn't paid the exam fees and he was afraid to go without paying. His teacher had been urging him to pay the fee. Upon hearing that, Ibra told Ichol that he should have talked to him if he had a problem, and he promised to give him the money to pay for the exam fees tomorrow. Before Ichol left, Ibra also advised him that if someone insulted him, he should stand up for himself and not just stay silent. Meanwhile, over at Mr. Haji's house, Ammar was given a job as a driver to pick up and drop off school children. Mr. Haji didn't like seeing a young man like Ammar unemployed. All day, Ibra held onto the money he had promised to give to Ichol. However, the next day, Mr. Muza returned the money to Ibra and told him to keep it. At that moment, Mr. Muza explained to Ibra that he should use the money for Ichol's school fees because it was his responsibility. Ibra felt like his efforts were not appreciated and told his father that they had always felt like they were doing things wrong in his eyes, even when they were trying to help him. When Mr. Muza got to work, he talked to his colleague named Achal. Achal suggested that Mr. Muza should take a break because Komar had arranged for his younger brother to become a security guard there as well. As Mr. Muza's illness worsened, he continued to keep it a secret from his children. However, one night, Jamila asked Ibra if his father had stopped working. She had heard the news from their neighbor Achal. At that time, Jamila advised Ibra to try to make his relationship with his father closer. From that point on, something unfortunate happened. The following day, Ichol found his father lying on the floor and quickly bring him to the hospital. There, the doctor explained that Mr. Muza had a lung problem and needed more treatment. Unfortunately, Ibra couldn't afford to take care of his father at the hospital, including paying for the room, medicine, and other expenses. When they returned home, Ichol vented his frustration. He felt like none of his older brothers cared about their father, especially when he was sick. Ibra, as the oldest son, felt guilty for not understanding his father better. In the evening, Ibra gathered his courage and asked his boss for a loan to take his father to the hospital. However, instead of helping, the boss looked down on Ibra, who came from a poor background, and refused to lend him money. Because of that, Ibra, Elzin, Ammar, and Jamila discussed how to get the money they needed. They decided to go to Ibra's workplace for help. Shortly after that, Jamila approached her boss. Seeing his girlfriend talking to the wrong person, Ibra asked Elzin to escort Jamila away. Unfortunately, Ibra's boss realized his wallet was missing and ordered his men to capture the four of them, leading to a chase. After that incident, Jamila took Ibra's wallet, and Elzin did the same, though it's unclear where he got it. Unfortunately, the money they collected still wasn't enough for the hospital expenses. So, Jamila suggested they use the money to bet on a match she would participate in the next day. However, Jamila ended up losing the match to a stronger opponent, causing them to lose all their betting money. Jamila apologized for the defeat, adding to their troubles. As days passed, Mr. Muza's health deteriorated further. Realizing this, Ibra went to his father's workplace at the bank. He asked his father's boss for help, mentioning that his father had worked there for over 20 years. However, the boss couldn't provide assistance, as he had other priorities more important than helping a security guard. This angered Ibra, and he even tried to confront him. Meanwhile, at Elzin's workplace, the boss gathered all the employees because a customer's wallet had gone missing. Elzin, not wanting to complicate matters, eventually admitted to stealing the wallet. As a result, Elzin was immediately fired from his job. On the other hand, at Mr. Muza's house, he scolded Ibra for causing a commotion by begging, which was embarrassing. Ibra then asked his father to be honest with them because he already knew that his father had stopped working and was seriously ill, which his father hadn't told him about. Late at night, Ibra, worried about his father's condition, had a shocking idea that surprised his two younger brothers. He suggested robbing the bank where their father used to work. At first, Elzin refused because he was afraid for his father, their family, and themselves. However, Ibra convinced them that they had no other option and little time left. Eventually, Elzin agreed, willing to do anything for their father's health. Soon after, Ammar went to Mr. Haji's house to borrow his car, pretending it was for taking his father to the hospital. Ammar also took the opportunity to apologize to Ust, promising not to tease or bother her again. Meanwhile, Ibra said goodbye to Jamila, promising to make her happy someday. The following day, their plans started, but they heard a noise coming from the trunk of the car. When they checked with Elzin, they found Ichol hiding there. Ibra didn't want Ichol to come along and told him to get down. However, Elzin felt sorry for Ichol and realized they had no more time, so they went to the bank. Before starting their mission, Ammar apologized to Ichol for bothering him in the past and asked him to wait in the car. Elzin also reassured Ichol, telling him to trust his three older brothers. Unfortunately, their arrival at the bank caused panic because it was their first time doing something like this in a rush. Ibra told the bank teller to put all the money into his bag, while Ammar instructed everyone to surrender their cell phones. Unexpectedly, Ibra spotted the bank boss and demanded more money. Then, a woman had a heart attack. Elzin couldn't bear to see her suffer and wanted to check on her. Ammar, knowing it was just part of their act, stopped Elzin from approaching her. But Elzin ignored Ammar's warning and went to help the woman. At that time, Ibra urged the boss to hurry up with the money. Meanwhile, Ammar heard a baby crying in the midst of the danger and moved the baby carriage to safety. Unfortunately, Elzin, who saw his younger brother on the ground, confronted a security guard and got into a fight. Unexpectedly, Elzin, while trying to protect them both, also got injured. Seeing his two younger brothers in trouble, Ibra used all his strength to deal with the security guard. Seeing his two younger brothers in a tough situation made Ibra feel really guilty for getting them involved in such a stressful mess. But surprisingly, Elzin told Ibra to run away from there and immediately take their father to the hospital. This made Ichol, who had just arrived, cry because he was afraid of losing his three older brothers, especially Elzin, who was one of the older brothers who loved him the most. Although Ibra didn't want to leave his two younger brothers, he reluctantly took Ichol with him, and they ran away together. Soon after, Ibra rushed to pick up his father and brought him to the hospital. Meanwhile, Elzin and Ammar, who were unconscious, were taken to the police station. When Ibra arrived at the hospital, in pain, he emptied his pockets in front of the receptionist and asked them to give his father the best possible treatment. Seeing that his father was getting good care, Ibra told Ichol to stay with their father because he still had other things to attend to. Afterward, Ibra met with Jamila to keep his promise, even though he knew he couldn't make her happy in the future. Then he asked Jamila to take care of Mr. Muza and Ichol as best as possible. 1 month passed, and Mr. Muza was being interviewed about the case involving his 3 sons. Although their actions couldn't be justified, Mr. Muza deeply regretted everything that had happened. He wished he had shown his children how much they meant to him. And with that, the film ends. The moral lesson from this film is don't rob a bank to pay for hospital bills. Instead, invest in family therapy and better communication skills.